Hello and welcome to Breast Friends Cancer Support Network. I'm Michelle Beck. I'm a two-time 10-year survivor of breast cancer. I'm the patient programs assistant at Breast Friends of Oregon. And when I have time, you can find me on social media at I Never Liked Pink. So today I had a snafu with the recording of my video. So this is a re-record of my intro. So I apologize for that. It might seem a little funny, but my guest is Liz Benditt, CEO and president of the Balm Box, a self-care and gifting site for cancer patients, and she's a four-time cancer survivor. Liz has a 25-year background as a senior marketing executive, and in addition to the Balm Box, she teaches undergraduate marketing courses at the University of Kansas School of Business. She's a public and community service advocate, serving on leadership boards for the National Charity League for the Greater Kansas City and the Mainstream Coalition. She lives in the Kansas City metro area with her husband, teenage kids, and one terrible dog, which I appreciate because I love terrible dogs. So today, Liz and I are going to talk about how she dealt with 4 cancer diagnoses in 8 years and why it's so important to practice self-care during and after treatment, and how she created the Balm Box to support others. So if this was a live video and not the mess up, I'd be welcoming Liz here today, and she literally told us how important her family is to her and the community that she has. So she was living her life, all was good, and then she was diagnosed with melanoma, skin cancer, which is unfortunately very scary. And thankfully, hers was caught early enough that she was able to have surgery and remove it. But really, the doctors told her, well, you're either going to die or you're going to wear a lot of hats going forward. So thankfully, she got through that treatment, had surgery, and came out of it pretty well and became a huge lover of sunscreen. Liz, tell us why why is melanoma, because I've had basal cell
Mhm.
skin cancer. Why is melanoma so dangerous?
Well, it's fast moving. So I guess I've learned so much about the different cancers through all of my myriad experiences. And melanoma is really, really fast moving. So once you are diagnosed with melanoma, it's one of those cancers that replicates very, very quickly and spreads really easily. And there are some cancers, and we'll get into my second, that are really slow moving. And so when you have a fast moving cancer, like a melanoma, they want to get that out as soon as possible so that it can't get anywhere else. Because
Okay.
when it's in your skin, it's really easy to cut out skin. We can sew skin together. It doesn't. It's more malleable. But if it gets into your liver, if it gets into your other organs, that then is really difficult because losing those pieces of organs becomes you
Devastating to
know
your overall body. Now,
yeah.
other than surgery, did you have other treatment for it?
I didn't.
Okay.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it was just a crazy process where they, took, it looks like I had a shark bite on my leg, like I have a chunk of leg missing, but so it's a little deformed. I made jokes about how my Sports Illustrated swimsuit model career was officially over, which trust me, it was over before then. but it was just to go from you're either going to die or wear more hats, right? Those are just two very, very broad, like those are the choices, and but yeah, luckily it didn't spread. I got it early enough, they got it out fast enough, there were clean margins, and they tell you to kind of get back on with your life, which I very much tried to do. When you have two littles at home, a toddler and a baby, like they're little need machines. They've constantly, whether they need a snack or their butts wiped or baths or
All
stories
of
or
the things.
games,
Yep.
right? All this stuff. And so, and it's a wonderful distraction, right? And it's in some ways easy to kind of get back to the normal swing of things when there is no follow-up, right? Either there is no radiation, there's no chemo, there was no medical oncology, it was just sunscreen. So of course I became obsessed with sunscreen and sun protection. But other than that, no, that's
Well,
it.
so you go through this. It's scary because they're like, well, you're either going to die or wear more hats. Obviously, you wore more hats,
Yes.
and life moved on. You're taking care of your kids, your career. So you're like, okay, I've had my cancer experience, but lo and behold, that was not the case. What came next?
So then, yeah, so 11 months later. So that's that point,
You
I
can't
really
even
had,
get a year off. My
I
gosh.
no, it was 11 months. I remember, to the day almost. And, we'll get into this in the fourth cancer, but my mom had breast cancer when she was in her late 40s. And so I started doing my regular mammograms when I was in my mid 30s, because recommendation was to start younger at the
Hmm.
time. And so I had just gone in for um, I think it was my one of my very first mammograms, and it came back abnormal. And so they asked me to go to a surgeon, and so to get it biopsied. And so I went to the surgeon to get that breast evaluated. And as anyone knows, when you're going to a breast surgeon, you're going topless, and they fill you up, and their hands are all over your boobs. And then her hand started traveling up my neck, and she said, "Oh, I see a lump in your neck." And I thought it was so weird because I'm here to have this boob evaluated, not my neck. And so they ended up getting a 2-for-1. I had 2 biopsies that week. I had one for my breast, which at that point ended up being completely normal. It was just, or
Hmm.
abnormal cells, but it was nothing problematic. But I had thyroid cancer, and I had no symptoms, none. It was so bizarre. It wasn't like, there are many things that happen to people that have thyroid cancer, either in terms of their metabolism or their energy levels or their sleep, or their skin or their hair, and I had none of that. So to be told that you're sick right when you don't feel sick is so weird. But yeah, I had thyroid cancer. And now thyroid cancer is very slow moving. And so they said, okay, well, we're going to have to remove your thyroid, but there's all these various tests that you're going to have to do ahead of time. And we want you to be in an office with an endocrinologist. So let's schedule your surgery for the next 2 months. And and it just doesn't track.
Like, how
When
does that
after I went
compute? Like
from,
melanoma, you're
yeah,
like, get in here tomorrow. And then this one, you're like,
yeah,
oh, sometime in the next couple months, it'll be okay.
right. Yeah. So that was very, very stressful to me at the time. I just felt like I had cancer and I wanted it out. But really, in retrospect, it was a gift, right? Because I could plan, so I knew, I could get work projects set aside. I had childcare set aside. It was all arranged. And in retrospect now, with a little distance, right, from that moment, it was so great to be able to organize my life around when a convenient time for surgery would be, right? So that was good. Now, the downside of that surgery was that I ended up in this teeny, teeny, tiny percentage of people that with one of these weird, it happens to 2% of patients, side effects. And I became what's called hypoparathyroid as a result of my surgery, which means that my body doesn't process calcium like a normal human. And
Okay.
so you need calcium for muscle function, and your heart is a muscle. So if you don't have enough calcium in your bloodstream, then your heart stops working and you die. And so we unfortunately learned that the hard way. I was released from the hospital, got home. I was going into what's called hypoglycemic shock, but didn't know it.
Hmm.
Eventually, like, I couldn't feel my hands, I couldn't feel my lips. And so we called the surgeon. They said, get to the ER, and they had me on IV calcium. And I was in the hospital for almost, it was about 2 weeks,
Oh,
while they
gosh.
tried to figure out how to regulate my calcium. Now, we did not plan for that.
No, that you
uh,
can't add that to your calendar.
no, no. So that was really difficult. Because it's so rare, there's not like a really traditional go-to medical treatment. So there's a fair amount of trial and error involved in endocrinology. And so it took about a year to kind of get me back to what I would call a good state of health. And that was tough. That was really hard.
So after you got through that year, did you feel like life kind of went back to normal a little bit?
It did. It did. I mean, I changed jobs. I went to go work in a nonprofit. Um I started running. I did a half marathon, right? Like, I felt like I had taken back control, right, of my life.
Hmm.
I think you'll talk to a lot of patients and we'll talk about loss of control. And I do feel like I kind of retook that control after being so sick for so long. So for sure.
Okay. Well, we do still have two more cancers to get through, but we are going to take a quick break, listeners. So stay with us. If you or a loved one need our services, please go to breastfriends.org and check out patient programs. If you'd like to donate to help Breast Friends do what they do, there's a big button on our website that says donate, or you can text BF radio to 41444. Stay with us. We'll be back. Hello, I'm Michelle, and my guest is Liz, the CEO and president of the Balm Box, curated gifts for cancer patients and self care. And she is talking about her four cancer journeys, why she is where she is today, and just how important self care is and self compassion and mindfulness and so many other things that we do talk about on a regular basis. But I think she has a little bit different angle on it since she's been through cancer four times. So that's why we're here with Liz today. So, Liz, we talked about two of your cancers already. So, you had, I believe it's about a 5 year break, but where you were healthy, let's say. And then you had a new diagnosis of basal cell skin cancer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's about right. Yeah. So it was I'm really good at giving cancer. We all have to have our skills, and that's one of mine. So yeah, so I had a normal kind of couple of years. It sort of was in the back rearview mirror. I had started a new job. I'd moved on. Kids were getting older. Life, became more normal. And then I was besties with my dermatologist, who you get to strip down naked in front of every 6 months. And
Mm-hmm.
they look at every square inch of your skin with this weird little magnifying glass thing. And it's a very humbling experience. And she found a little nudge on the side of my nose that she didn't like the look of. And we turns out that it was basal cell skin cancer. So again, going back to fast moving, slow moving cancers, basal cells, and I don't remember exactly how it works, but it's something like the upper layers so that it's not as deep as like a melanoma, such that it doesn't, like, I think a basal cell, don't, for sure, doctors can correct me if this is wrong, but my understanding would be like something like a basal cell, if left untreated, could become a melanoma.
Okay.
But over time, but I was in good shape. And so again, this was a gift where they came back and said, well, it's basal cell, you need to have it removed. And the downside is it's just big enough that you're going to have again a more significant surgery. And so I had to go to plastic surgeon to talk about what that might look like. And
Right.
the
Because
first
it's in
class,
the center of your face.
yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, they have to cover it up, right? So like and so the downside was because, and again, you can't totally tell, the lighting is lovely in this little Zoom, but I actually have a lot of freckles. And so, the, you can, for some folks, if you have like a really consistent skin tone and skin color, what they can do is they can take that little nudge of skin off your nose and then replace it with like a chunk of skin from the side of your neck. But if you're like me and you have freckles everywhere, you can't match that freckle pattern. It would just look like a weird patch on your face. And so then kind of the options become more limited. And so it became this question over what kind of surgery I would have to have in order to close up the gap, to have skin
Mm-hmm.
that covered my entire nose. And so the first surgeon said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this procedure where we're going to start at the inside of your eye and then cut down kind of the line between your chin and nose all the way down to kind of your last lines in your face. And then that is going to give us the opportunity to stretch the skin to cover the nose, and then we'll sew that up. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to have a scar that goes from like the inside of my eye all the way down my face to my chin.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yep, wouldn't you want to schedule your surgery?
And I'm
And
like,
I was like, oh,
I don't actually.
like, God, that's real. I mean, I don't mean to be vain, but gosh, I don't really want to walk around like a scar face the rest of my life. Like, I'm pretty young. Like, just is there any other option? And he was just adamant that that was the best choice, and that was what he did. And I said, okay, well, I'll get back to you. And so that was when I thought, well, this is slow moving and I have time. And so I reached out to friends and family, asked for referrals for local plastic surgeons, got a referral for a particular doctor that was quote unquote good with faces. And I went to go see him, and he had a really different procedure in mind. And that was one where he cut just along the inside of like the shadow of my nose. And then this was the part that was really bizarre, is that he said the issue is that there's just not quite enough skin to cover the gap. And so what we do is you leave the skin, so they do this process where they cut the skin, they stretch it out, and then they leave you the skin unclosed, and you're just kind of, you walk around with a bandage sewn to your face for about a week. And then after that week, you come back and the skin will have relaxed enough that will give them just enough pliability to close it up. But then your scar is really small and it's in the shadow of your face. And within a year, you really don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, well, this sounds like a miserable 7 days, but gosh, then you live around without, you can live
Yeah,
without
much
being a
better
scar face.
overall option.
For sure. And so I went down that path. And again, so lucky that my insurance covered it. I mean, certainly much more expensive than the other procedure, right? Because it's 2 surgeries instead of one. It's miserable to go through. I don't recommend walking around with a bandage sewn to your face. That was uncomfortable. And I didn't sleep well. It was hard to bathe, right? But all of that was so much, like, again, my attitude in that whole process was like, hey, this is what I'm doing to preserve my face. It's 100% worth it, right? This is what and so this is knowing that I chose that, and that the trade-off was living without a scar was so much more, like, that just attitudinally made it infinitely easier, right, to manage than if it was something that I was forced to do or didn't have a choice in or didn't participate in that kind of process. So again, like, all those things kind of go into the back of your head as you start learning, okay, well, gosh, being able to plan when to do this is a gift, right? I realized that kind of post thyroidectomy. And so this time around, I had to plan it around my son's birthday party, but it was great. So I knew, like, I wanted to get his birthday party in a little earlier so I could get this done. And with, in terms of like when it would be convenient for me in terms of work and process, right? All this stuff. So I picked my surgery timeline. I did this thing that sucked, but again, was like infinitely better long-term prospects. And long-term story short, it all worked out. And you really can't tell, like, between the way that the scar has healed and just a little bit of topical makeup, and really you don't see it.
That's amazing. And it's not about vanity. It's just about, it's your sense of well-being, because your face is the first thing that someone sees. And
absolutely, I didn't want my life to be, gosh, what happened to your face, or have people wonder, or having to point it out or talk about it all the time. Like, it's just not. I think that, yeah, it's about trying to reconcile, how I present myself to the world, and not trying to broadcast all of my different scars. And, I don't know. It was, I'm not apologetic over it, right? I feel very confident, and I'm grateful. Again, I think, the insurance agreed that it was worth doing it, despite the incremental cost. So I think that, yeah, there were a lot of benefits to that.
And you really just gave the prime example of being your own advocate, which is not
Yeah,
easy to do, but you found a second opinion and you found something that worked better for you. And that's what advocacy is all about for yourself. And it's so important. So you get through this and you're like,
yeah,
I've been through 3 now. I'm good. I've had so many surgeries, but no. What the hell? Like, when is enough enough?
I
Because
know.
next you were diagnosed with breast
Breast
cancer.
cancer.
I mean, we can laugh about it
Yeah.
now, but at the time, I'm sure there was very little laughter. How did you find that? Was it you were still
It
doing
was
the
just a
regular
regular
mammograms?
mammogram. Yes,
Okay.
on a regular mammogram, caught it, biopsy. Turns out, they didn't like the look of that. Had a, and then it was diagnosed as breast cancer. But this time around, instead of, if you go back to that first melanoma and I was in panic, this was more of a, this is gonna suck, but it's gonna be fine. I didn't ever wonder if I was gonna die, right? Like, it was staged really low. I could get away with a lumpectomy and not a mastectomy. Um, there I had multiple, I had lots and lots of treatment options. I evaluated all of them. I took my time. So I took time to decide what I wanted to do. And I am like an information person. I like data to back up decisions. And so even if I go back to that original thyroidectomy, one of the standard processes after thyroidectomy is to do something called radioactive iodine treatment, where you swallow iodine, and you personally become radioactive for some period of time, while the iodine, and I have this like visual in my head where it's like a Pac-Man that goes and it eats up all the errant thyroid cells in your body. And I at the time, it was really, really controversial, but I chose not to do that. I didn't like the idea of me being radioactive around my small children. um, and also, again, that my odds of recurrence on the thyroidectomy, post thyroidectomy, was about 2%, and the odds of complications from the radioactive thyroid treatment were about 5%. And I thought, you know what? I can live with 2% odds of recurrence. I'm good. Like, I'm not gonna, after, you told me that it was completely rare to have this, hypocalcemia, which I have to live with the rest of my life. Like, no, I'm good. I'm not doing anything more. And now 10 years later, it's actually become even more common for people to reject it for the same reasons I did, which is it's not necessary. Why do I have to put myself through some incremental thing that's miserable just, to go from a 2% odds of recurrence to a 0.25% odds of recurrence? 2% is low. I'm good. So that's how I focused on breast cancer. I said, okay, well, what are your recommended treatments and what are my odds of recurrence based on all the different combinations of treatments? And what are the odds of side effects as a result of all these different treatments? And so it's like a Jenga game, right? Where you're kind of putting together all the different combinations. And I had to come up with subjectively what I could live with. And so I chose I chose lumpectomy, and I chose lumpectomy, which is a very like a less aggressive surgical treatment. And I chose a very aggressive course of radiation treatment, which brought my odds of recurrence down to about 15%. I did not have to do chemo. So grateful for that. And I did a lot of number crunching on whether or not to do hormone treatment, and I chose not to. And it was still is controversial decision. My odds of recurrence without it were about 15 to 20%, and odds of recurrence with it are like 8 to 10. And I decided, based on all of my experiences and how my body seems to get every single stupid side effect known to man, I didn't want to go there. I was good. And here I am 5 years later, having not done it. And now my odds of recurrence are the same as the general population.
Yeah,
So
and 5 years is a big mark to get through. So congratulations. And
Thank
it is
you.
very controversial to say no to the endocrine therapy. I did 4 years of tamoxifen, and then after my second time, I did 5 years of the aromatase inhibitors, and they sucked for me. And I finally was able to finish up after 5 years, and I'm like a whole new person because it's hard for many people, and it was hard for me.
It was hard, and I don't doubt that. And I've had, again, so this is where I spent a lot of time talking to different doctors, and I think there's this perception that I certainly had before all of my cancer treatments, that doctors are all knowing and that there's a very standard and prescribed treatment plan for whatever ailment you have. And I, 8 years through it all, and I've learned that there's a fair amount of art that goes in with the science, and that there are choices, and that there are still some elements that really are subjective, and I'm such an advocate for patients taking a more active role in deciding on their treatment plans, and not just dictate, not just looking to their doctors to tell them what it is. Now, again, there's some people that maybe find comfort in that, and if that's your character, then that's awesome, good for you. But that wasn't good for me. I needed to be, and I learned right through this whole process that there is a lot of benefit to being a more active participant in choosing what your treatments are. Everything from, that really difficult 2-part surgery to, on my nose, to choosing not to do the endocrine hormone therapy. What I did instead, and this was in negotiation with my different doctors, was if I wasn't going to do the hormone treatment, then I would do added mammograms and MRIs.
You're like, I can do that, no problem.
Yeah, an annual MRI, done, right? No big deal. That's easy peasy. Getting insurance to pay for it, not so easy. But again, like, if this is where I don't want to flaunt my privilege, but I was, we're able to kind of swing that. So those are choices that I made. They are right for me. By no means every patient has to do what's right for them. But what I'm trying to say is that every patient really should make a conscious choice, right, about what they're wanting to do and what they're willing to do, and understanding that there's very few treatments out there that aren't painful. They all suck.
I mean, yeah, it's cancer. There is pain. It's not like, oh, this is wonderful, but no, it's still cancer. We're going to take another break here in a minute, but you had 8 years of stress and unknowns balancing your career and your family. How were your emotions during this, and what got you through?
I mean, I think that what got me through is gratitude. I think we might have talked about this a little bit before. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, My mom was born in Poland and they immigrated to the United States when she was 9. Um, my grandmother always was so grateful for her second life. Before the Holocaust, she was married and had a son, and they were all killed in camps. She looked like me, very Aryan, and she was hidden and met my grandfather in hiding, and they got married after the war after she learned that her son and husband died. And it's just, I mean, it's just a gruesome, gruesome story. And yet, so here's this woman who could be so just miserable, angry at the world, feeling like the world owed her something. And instead, she was just grateful. She was so grateful for her second life, and she was so joyous. And my grandfather was kind of bitter. It was really interesting to kind of see these two different paths. And so to me, like all the trauma that I go through, nothing compares to the Holocaust, right? Like you just can't compare that. And so there's a little bit of like, okay, well, at least I'm not hiding in a barn in the Polish countryside for 4 years eating potatoes. And so there's that. And then from there, just again, my grandmother was joyous. She was grateful for life. And so I think I try to I think about that all the time.
That's a beautiful answer. And if you break it down, we should all be more grateful for every day because no day is promised and you never know what is going to happen.
For sure.
So we are going to take that break. Listeners, please stay with us. If you'd like to reach out and contact me, I am at Michelle Beck at breastfriends.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute. I'm Michelle. My guest is Liz, the CEO and president of the Balm Box. Now, Liz, we've talked about all of your cancers a lot, which more than most should ever have to experience, but you've come through and you have found joy and gratitude in your life still in so many ways. And one of the things you did was found the Balm Box. Can you tell us about the how and the why and what you're hoping to do for others from it?
Yes, yes, I'm very, very proud of it. So going back to in 2017, I was going through radiation treatment for breast cancer. I was very young, very healthy. Everyone told me it would be no big deal. I scheduled all my treatments for 7:45 in the morning so that I could just knock them out and get into the office. And I was just not prepared for how sick I was going to be. Right? It's so funny, right? Yeah,
Radiation is exhausting.
it was,
It
and
literally
not
sucks the
only
life out of you.
it does. I was miserable. I was exhausted. I was cranky. Um, I and I also, given my very pale skin, I burned to a crisp. I was miserable. And so I was constantly looking for all of this stuff, right? I needed things like, I was at the office and I was working, with a lot of dudes, and I wanted like ice packs that I could throw into my shirts that wouldn't leak through and cause wet spots, because that anything that, whatever, those dudes, just anything that drew attention to my chest was bad. And then and I couldn't, I wearing a bra was uncomfortable, and I just needed I needed a bra that I would at least hold the girls up but not be underwire, not, press on all of the scars. And I needed ice packs. I needed so much lotion, and I needed all this stuff. And what I was getting from friends and family, it was so well meaning, right? I got a lot of pink t-shirts and coffee mugs and kicking cancer tote bags and all of these things that are so well meaning, but really, like in the moment, I didn't want that. I wanted like an aluminum free deodorant that didn't actually cause sweat stains, right? Like I just wanted those functional things, and I was getting a lot of what I would call inspirational items.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the seed. That at that time I thought, where is radiationrelief.com? Like I need that website stat. It didn't exist, so I bought the URL at the time, and I didn't do anything with it. And so over the course of a couple of years, I started really playing around with what would a business model look like? What could this be? And it really wasn't until the pandemic hit, right, in spring of 2020, where everyone all of a sudden, I go from being this like full-time working executive with all the, the non-for-profit things that I do and things, my kids' schedules and everything, to all of a sudden, everything's canceled and I have this time. And it was a gift. It was awesome. And so I actually sat down and I actually built out, what would this business plan look like? I wrote a business plan and I wrote a survey. And in the survey, it went down two paths. So one path was, we asked people, have you ever had cancer, right? And that went down one path. And have you ever gifted a cancer patient? And that went down another path. And so the cancer patients, we asked all sorts of questions about, what were some of the treatments that they went through and what tools did they like. And then we had a list of 50 items that they had to rate on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, don't give me this, and 5 being that would be awesome, I would want it every day. And these 50 different items. And then we asked cancer gifters, what'd you buy? And it was amazing how many people had the same experience I did and had the same point of view. So when you ask people to rate these, cancer patients to rate various items, they rated things like lip balm and lotion and ice packs and fleece blankets as like 5 all across the board. Like those were super high scoring items. And things like kicking cancer tote bags and coffee mugs and worry stones and inspirational poetry were the worst performers. They got 1s across the board. And then you ask people, what are you buying? And it's mostly food, flowers, and kicking cancer stuff. Like, and I
because
thought,
people
wow,
don't know.
no,
and they're
and it's
well-meaning.
well-meaning. Yeah. And so there was this huge disconnect, right, between like what patients want and need and what people were buying. And I thought, wow, there's a business model, right? And so that got me off my butt, and I finished the business plan, and I had this changed my life for better for worse, right? And decided to go rogue entrepreneur. And again, I'm so lucky that my kids and my family, and especially my husband, we went from 2 pretty comparable earners to allowing me to go. I teach part-time right at the University of Kansas, and then the other part-time I run Balm Box, actually they're full-time really. I run Balm Box, and he, that cut my income more than half. But he's been so supportive, and so all of that changed. We used the pandemic as kind of the launching pad, and launched in fall of 2020. And so based on all of those that survey feedback, and by the way, I should mention the survey I just sent to friends and family and posted to my own personal social media, but it was the pandemic and people were at home and bored and online, and it went viral. And so here's the survey that takes like almost half an hour to complete, and I got over 600 responses.
That's
and
amazing, because if I have a survey over 5 minutes, I just stop and move on.
Right. Most people do. I'm just telling you, it was like this moment in time where I could capture, it was something to do, and people did it. It was incredible. And I just got the most incredible feedback. I don't think if I tried that today, it would work, right? Like it was just very, very lucky. And so I was able to do it for free too, which was also very, very lucky. And so got all of that feedback and then used that to curate the gift boxes on Balm Box. And so the product line has gone through probably 2 significant revisions. The first round, we focused on a combination of gifts and self-care. It's kind of 2 different paths. I will tell you, in the first year, we saw that well over 80% of boxes purchased were gifts, whereas 20% are purchased as self-care. So really started to focus the business as more of a gift store as compared to self. It doesn't mean you can't buy them for yourself. I love it when people buy them for themselves. I think they more should. But certainly in terms of, where we are today, it's definitely more gifts. And we've curated gifts based on kind of where you are in your treatment plan. So looking at whether you are going through chemo or radiation or surgery, or you're in recovery, and kind of looking at what are the different combinations of items that rank well with with cancer patients, right? So again, I always go back to that research. I try really hard not to rely on my own subjectivity in terms of things I would like. It's hard, right? Because I do have an opinion. But you really have to look at what do cancer patients themselves say would be useful, and then putting all those things together in kind of different combinations, so that depending on what your budget is or your price model is, there's kind of different choices.
That's amazing. And
yeah.
So obviously you've been around for 2 years now. What is your, I know you said like lotion and lip balm are like the most successful, like off the top of your head, like what's your most purchased item on your site?
Best seller, I have 2 bestsellers.
I couldn't think of that right word, the bestseller.
Yes,
Thank
bestseller.
you.
The number 1 bestseller is our mastectomy package, and it's such a great package. It's such a good value. I went through a process where I was looking, again, the things that people rated as really useful were pillows, or like specialty pillows. And so when I was going through radiation treatment, our surgeon's office, they have like these, I think it's like nuns that donate these really charming little pillows, and they look kind of like T-bones. and they just kind of like fit. They're wedges that fit in between yourself and the seatbelt, and it
Mm-hmm.
kept the seatbelt from rubbing
Rubbing.
against your upper body, which is so painful. And I had friends say, "Oh, I wish I would have had that when I was going through chemo because it always hurt my port." And I thought, "Oh, well,
Mhm.
that's really interesting." So it's the same concept where basically you don't realize that a seatbelt is just going to be such a challenge. And so we have these fabulous seatbelt pillows. And so then I kind of improved on that design, and then found a manufacturer out in Virginia that does soft goods manufacturing. And so they make these pillows just for us. So there are pillows, these little seatbelt pillows. And then also the side pillows. Now, I didn't have a mastectomy, but even during radiation, I was constantly looking for a pillow that I could put underneath my arm that would separate the weight of my arm from my chest. And
Yes,
so
because
even though I didn't
you
have,
don't want those to touch. It's been
yeah,
5 years since my last surgery, and I still sleep with an underarm pillow under one of my arms.
do you really?
Yeah,
I didn't realize it
it's
was
like
that
a
long.
heart-shaped pillow because I've
Yeah,
gotten so used to it that
yes,
it just is more comfortable. I travel with it. I take it everywhere with me, and my husband just laughs at me. He's like, and he thinks it looks like a boomerang, so he throws it around the bedroom.
it does. Yeah, I mean, and so we have a slightly different variation. It's more, I call it a C-shaped pillow, because it creates a little bit more of a cushion. So it's probably better to use when you're sitting up so that it has like a cushion on your back, with a kind of a more skinny arm in the front. But yeah, that pillow, that C-shaped pillow, is also, again, something that started by kind of, sourcing from other suppliers and then realized that we can improve upon the design and ended up doing that and manufacture them ourselves out of this company out in Virginia. So we that combination package, that mastectomy care package you can do for a single or double, includes either one or two, right, of the underarm pillows, the seatbelt pillow, and the sweat-free ice pack. And that is just such a great gift, and I get such good feedback on that one, which is just so great. It's so great to get.
I
The
love that.
very best feedback I got on that was that a buyer sent me a note saying, "I sent this to my mom who's having a mastectomy," and she wrote back, "I feel seen." And I was
Oh,
like, ah, that
winning,
was,
winning.
I felt so good. I felt so good. I feel seen. That was the best feedback I've ever gotten. And I get lots and lots of feedback, but I love that particular phrasing.
Oh,
And then the second
100%.
one is the chemo care package, which is really, it's just so simple. It's a big fleece blanket because you're so uncomfortable when you're sitting there in chemo. Cozy socks and some ginger mints and a water bottle. So again, useful but feels very gifty, right? And that
Mhm.
is our. And then there are different things that you can add to it to kind of zhuzh it up and make it bigger. But really focusing on nausea and cold as the top two complaints when it comes to chemo. So those are really the number one and number two selling products that we have on the site.
And listeners, you can find all of this at thebalmbox.com. I just didn't want to forget that, and we'll talk about it at the end
Yeah.
as well. But so your website also has self-care items. What did you do for self-care when you were going through all of your treatments?
The best thing I could do for myself when I was going through treatments is I gave myself a break. I was so used to being in charge and the organizer of all the things, and I had to step back and lean on others to do that for me. And that was really, really, as a probably borderline control freak, that was really hard. That was very, very hard for me. But my husband had to be in charge of carpool and play dates and the organizing, and I needed to rest.
I
So, and that was,
completely understand that
yeah,
coming from a fellow control freak. Yeah.
yes. So delegation, I delegated, and you know what? The world continued to turn on its axis, which was a great lesson in and of itself, right?
That's a really hard one for me. I'm still dealing with that, but one day I'll get through
Aren't we all?
it. So going through your experiences and now with the bomb box, what are some things to say that you may know that are good to say to someone who's been diagnosed, and what should you never say to someone who's going through treatment?
So funny. You and I had this conversation on that other podcast
Mhm.
too. Okay, so I'm going to start with what not to say, right? So I am a big, big believer that you should never say, "What can I do?" It just puts the patient in such a weird position. Who knows how? I don't know how to ask for help. Like, some people are great at asking for help, and I'm deeply jealous of them, but I think that they're the minority. I think the majority of us don't know how to ask for help and don't know what to say because the knee jerk reaction is, "Oh, nothing, I've got it." And so saying, how can I help is just, it's very, very hard. Either I don't know what you're willing to do. I don't know how much time or money you want to spend. I don't really know whether you're genuine or not. Don't put me as a patient in the position of having to figure that out, because that's just a whole other mind trick that I don't want to mess with. So don't say that. But what you can say is, I would love to help. I'd like to, here are some ideas I have. A, B, or C. I can organize a meal train. I can drive you to chemo. I can take your kids to soccer practice. Whatever it is, just putting out their ideas, and then that gets the conversation started, to me is infinitely more valuable than how can I help.
Perfect. Thank you. And I did have a guest on earlier this year. Her name is Paula Seafair, and she's the co-founder of an app called the My Care Crew app. And it allows the patient to literally create an app and then has like kind of Caring Bridge. You send out all their info on it, and they can put requests on there. And people can just go
Perfect.
on and click on the request and click on the meals. And so definitely check that out. But yes, what can I do? I don't know. I'm fucking having cancer. Leave me alone.
Yeah, right.
Excuse my French, but that's it.
Yeah.
So we are almost out of time, Liz. So tell our listeners all the places they can find you and Balm Box.
Yeah, we're on all the socials. So you can start with thebalmbox.com. That's TheBalmbox.com. And we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And you can find me pretty much all those places. So we'd love to see you. And of course, the number one thing to do when hear someone has cancer is, of course, buy them a gift from the Balm Box. But
that's where I send people to
yeah.
all the time now, because I'm like, well, I didn't go through chemo, so I don't have those experiences, but I use this, and this, and you can find them all in these baskets. And I don't know about you, but I don't have time to go out and find everything. So that's the one-step shopping for
Yes.
gifts for cancer
Yes.
patients. Perfect. Liz, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. We appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation.
Yes, it has been so fun. So, listeners, again, you can find all this information at thebalmbox.com, Facebook, the Balm Box, Instagram, Balm Box IG, and all the places. Look for Liz and send out those gifts to people who need them, because even though you don't think they might need anything, they always do. If you or a loved one need our services, please go to breastfriends.org and check out patient programs. You can find the podcast on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch on the Breast Friends YouTube channel. If you need to reach out, I'm at Michelle Beck at breastfriends.org, and we will be back next week. Until then, remember, we rise by lifting each other.